Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror in film, television, books, and in popular culture. Well, greetings, everyone. Welcome to the program. My name is Bruce Markison. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and producer, Tracy Asteria. So, Tracy, how was your Christmas?
It was pretty good, Bruce. It was nice to have a bit of downtime, and we actually had a white Christmas, which is the first in quite a long time. So I was really happy about that. Yeah. How's everything going with you? How was your Christmas with your family?
Good. It was very nice. One of the things I got actually helps with our broadcast, a brand new computer. My wife and daughter surprised me with that. I was really above and beyond the call on their part. So maybe it'll make me look and sound better. We'll see. Jury's out on that, but we'll give it a try. But always nice to have a new computer. I've had this, the other one for about 5 years. Oh, wow. And it was about due to, head to the museum and be replaced by a newer brand. So we're glad about that. I also did, as I was telling you a moment ago off air, I got a book that our friend Mark DeWidziak wrote back in 1997, The Night Stalker Companion. It's now out of print. And somehow my family was able to find that. I don't know where, maybe on the black market of some kind, but they got that for me. And I'm into about the first 2 chapters. It's really good. It's all about the 2 Night Stalker movies and the TV series, of course, with Darren McGavin. So I'm really enjoying that as well. And by the way, Mark is scheduled to have a new edition of that Night Stalker Companion coming out probably in March, maybe April of 2025. And we do hope to have him on as a guest to preview that. So it's going to be fun. Some things to look forward to in this coming year, which is just around the corner.
Exactly. Well, Happy New Year to everybody in advance.
That's right. We make the transition from Christmas to the new year. And on this week's edition of the Ghostly Gallery, we're very glad to be talking about the exciting new film Nosferatu, and we're doing that with our friend Josh Hitchens. He joins us for the 4th time here on the Ghostly Gallery podcast. Josh is an accomplished historian, writer, theater director, actor, playwright, pretty much does it all. He's the author of several books in the Haunted America series, and he has also performed a number of one-man plays about subjects that include Frankenstein and Dracula. Josh, welcome back to the Ghostly Gallery podcast. It's been a while since we last talked to you. How have you been?
I've been really, really well. It's been a crazy year, but a good year, and very, very glad to be back with you both again for the 4th time.
Yeah, you're at the leaderboard, top of the leaderboard for you.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that's worth anything, but it's worth mentioning, certainly.
I think so. I think it's worth it.
Well, I'm really excited about this show. I mean, I get excited for every show, but this one in particular, because we've been talking about this film for a long time. It is a highly anticipated film, one of the most highly anticipated horror movies in years. I really can't remember the last one that approaches Nosferatu. And before we start questioning Josh about the film, getting some of his insights, his thoughts. Of course, he's an actor and a director and a writer, so he'll have some very pertinent thoughts on the movie. But we do want to sort of set the scene in terms of the storyline to the film, especially for those who have not seen it. This film, directed by Robert Eggers, who is really establishing a tremendous reputation in horror. So the story is set in the 1830s, and it centers on a German real estate agent named Thomas Hutter, who is played by Nicholas Hoult. And he is given an assignment by his employer, Herr Nack. Thomas must make a 6-week journey to Transylvania to complete a real estate transaction with a very wealthy man named Count Orlok. He is purchasing a large but rather decrepit property in Wisburg, Germany, where Hutter lives. Now, this months-long assignment is very upsetting to Hutter's wife, Ellen, played by Lily Rose Depp. She's already suffering from bouts of depression or melancholy, as it's referred to in the 19th century, and in the film as well. Now, Herr Nack does not tell Thomas the full story about Count Orlok, played wonderfully by Bill Skarsgård. We'll talk more about that a bit later on. Orlok is a strange, menacing man hiding somewhat a monstrous identity. Orlok will hold Thomas as his prisoner, biting him in the chest and making him one of his victims. And as part of Orlok's master plan, he is going to try to spread a plague throughout Whisburg while also reconnecting with Ellen Hooder, Thomas's wife. He had romantically connected to her years earlier through a very beastly and horrific vision / nightmare that we see at the start of the film. In the meantime, Ernok, through his secret occult arrangement with Orlok, becomes the monster's servant. He's pretty much out of his mind at this point. As Orlok makes his way to Whisburg, Ellen is beset with a series of nightmares and seizures, and that creates concern for her good friend Anna Harding and her husband Friedrich. Ellen's physician, Dr. Sievers, attempts to treat Ellen, but really with little success. Dr. Sievers, becoming desperate, then seeks help from his mentor, a brilliant but somewhat off-centered scientist named Albin von Franz, played by the great Willem Dafoe. A strong believer in the occult, which has gotten him into trouble, von Franz comes to the conclusion that Ellen is possessed by the Nosferatu, a powerful, demonic, and completely evil vampire. And from there, the battle between good and evil really begins. And I don't want to go into too much detail beyond that because I don't want to give out, the whole premise of the movie and give away some of the twists and the turns. But that is the gist of the story. So as we bring in Josh Hitchens, Josh, first off, this one of the most hyped, anticipated horror films in a long, long time. First, did it meet your expectations or did it fall short of that?
I think it definitely did meet my expectations. I've been waiting for this, as many people have for quite a long time, because Robert Eggers was initially going to make this as his second film after The Witch, but then funding fell through a couple times, so that was like 2016 or something, or when it was originally supposed to start filming. So the fact that now it's finally being made after all these years of waiting and anticipation, it's very, very exciting to finally see it and go to the theater. And seeing it in a theater is highly recommended, I would say, just with the visuals and the sound and the music. Like, it's really great on the big screen. But yeah, I liked it tremendously. I was very, very pleased with it overall.
I have to agree, and we'll talk more about that, and we'll give full assessments of the movie before all is said and done. This was my first trip back to the theater since the pandemic. The last movie that I saw was not a particularly good one. It was a remake of The Turn of the Screw. I believe it was either late 2019 or early 2020 before the pandemic really set in. So it's been a good 4 or 5 years for me, and I like the movie so much. I really felt kind of exhilarated after the movie and forgotten almost what the experience of being in a theater and seeing it on the big screen was all about. Now, a good remake is certainly faithful to the basic original story, while at the same time, it's able to bring in some new twists, some unexpected developments. Josh, do you feel that Nosferatu did that during the course of the 2 hours plus that it was on the screen?
I think so. I love all the versions of Nosferatu that exist. The original, of course. I love the Werner Herzog 1979 Nosferatu the Vampire, which I still think is my favorite version of this story. But I thought that the Eggers new version is such a worthy addition to sort of the Nosferatu film canon. Definitely is a film made with deep love for the material. Robert Eggers has, loved the film since he was in high school. He directed a play version of it, and played Orlok as well in that version. So you can tell, with every moment on screen that everything has been very, very well thought out and planned. So definitely some great homages to both the two Nosferatu films that came before it, as well as the Lugosi Dracula. But I also really loved how Eggers weaved in even, I think, more elements of Stoker's novel, especially in terms of characterization, than the previous two versions of Nosferatu have. So I thought, definitely honored what came before it while also going in some interesting new directions, which I think is always really exciting.
Oh, wow. No, I agree with that too, Josh. I'm curious, in your opinion, would you recommend this film to someone who is unfamiliar with the original storyline?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely would. I don't think that you have to have seen any of the versions to
Mhm.
enjoy this movie. I don't think you need to have seen any versions of Dracula to enjoy this movie. And I think it really very much stands on its own, like for new audience members as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. And do you think that this film will appeal more to Eggers fans or just overall to general horror enthusiasts?
I feel like my instinct with that is I think this is definitely probably the film, because this is his film number 4, and I think
Mhm.
this is probably the film with the widest or the broadest in terms of audience appeal. That it isn't just for like hardcore Robert Eggers fans or
Right.
Dracula fans or horror fans. Like it's something that I think a lot of people who like all different types of movies would enjoy. And I love that they released it on Christmas Day, because it is also, in its second half, literally takes place during the Christmas tide season. So it's a nice addition to the Christmas horror canon as well.
Exactly. What are your thoughts on that, Bruce?
I think, as usual, Josh is on the money. I didn't really think much about the Christmas connection before going in, but without a doubt, this is a film that I think is going to reach a very large audience. It's certainly going to appeal to horror fans, but it's going to, I think, maybe bring in some fans that aren't diehard horror fans, maybe reach into the mainstream a little bit more. And I would be
Mhm.
shocked if this is not a financial success for the studio. So I think Josh is absolutely correct in what he says there.
Mhm.
Josh, I want to get your thoughts on kind of the early part of the film, because in contrast to a lot of the Nosferatu, Dracula films of the past, they don't do a lot of the setup in terms of the Harker Hooder character coming to Transylvania. A lot of times the film will begin as Harker slash Hooder is on the way, or has already arrived at the castle, or is just about to arrive at the castle. This film actually does quite a bit of a setup into what Hooder's personal life is like, his wife's condition, the fact that she is emotionally very fragile, also the fact that he tends to arrive to work late, and yet his boss is giving him this really important assignment. We get a lot more of a sense of the relationship of Hooder, who is essentially Harker from Dracula, what his family situation, his home life is like, what his work situation is. And I like the fact that this movie did that. We don't see that a lot in the past. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I really, because I feel like this Nosferatu, it felt like in the beginning especially follows a lot of the same beats, as the Nosferatus that have come before it and a lot of the Draculas that have come before it. But I think the main difference here with this film is that it gives everything more room to breathe. As you were saying, that it does allow you to get to know the world a bit better and to get to know both Thomas Hooder and Ellen as people, both individually and in their marriage. So that before, Thomas sets off on his journey to Transylvania, that, we care about them, like we care about what happens to them, which I think is very, very important, because especially with a story that is so well known by this point, almost approaching myth, like for you to not just view, like, especially like the Jonathan Harker, Thomas Hooder character as just like a prop or a way to get into Dracula land, like, is a really important thing and a great achievement. And I really do admire Robert Eggers's wish from the very beginning to really center Ellen in this film, in a more so than has been done before. I think he's successful to varying degrees in doing that. I think some things work really well, some things not as well for me, but I really love that impulse, to make it more her story, that she is more of an agent in why things are happening and how things resolve.
Yeah, her character is really fleshed out a lot more. She's still a victim, like the female characters, Mina in the Dracula canon often are. But we also see that she's going to take on a pretty active role in fighting back against this creature, and is really going to become a central figure. So I think that's a really important point and a real strength of the film. Let's get to the character that, of course, everybody wants to talk about, and that is Count Orlok. And I'm going to say right off the top of my head, I think Bill Skarsgård, the Swedish actor who has done, quite a bit of horror in the past, he's done the It films. He did Hemlock Grove toward the earlier part of his career. That was one of the first horror series that I believe that Netflix ever did. He was very good as one of the werewolves in that. I think Skarsgård is absolutely brilliant here as Count Orlok, and you can certainly feel free to agree or disagree with that. Somehow he manages to speak more deliberately and menacingly than even Bela Lugosi did, but without it falling into parody. It doesn't become comical, at least not from my perspective. And when Hooder first meets Orlok, the Count greets him with these three ominous words: "You are late." I mean, this is not a pleasant, charming guy. What did you think of Orlok at that point after that first line?
I was so happy. Like, Bill Skarsgård is an actor that I've always enjoyed, and as you said, like, I really love that he's really kind of carving out, a path for himself in horror films, and in also a lot of, like, dramatic physical transformation and use of makeup and prosthetic, which is very certainly the case with his Orlok. So it's almost like, a 21st century Lon Chaney kind of, he has possibility going on. I thought he was absolutely fantastic. Like, if you did, and I talked to I went to see the film with a couple people, and at the end of it, I mentioned, I love Bill Skarsgård as Orlok, and they're like, that was him. Like, he completely disappears into it. Obviously does not look anything like himself, does not sound anything like himself. I absolutely loved the design of this Orlok, both in the body makeup and the costuming, which, again, as with all Robert Eggers, is completely historically accurate. But I most of all loved his voice, as you mentioned. Has like the authentic accent, but the fact that it is so guttural and low, and he worked with an opera singer to lower his voice an octave for this film. And like the wheezing in between words, like that, you really get the effect that, like, this is literally a centuries old, basically walking corpse who probably has not spoken words to anyone else in like a century or two, and now he has to. And like, you can hear the effort that it takes him to actually speak words out loud in the film, which I thought, using those old vocal cords again. And I loved that. I thought he was absolutely fantastic in it. Wouldn't change a thing about his work.
So, Josh, you think the voice, that's all Skarsgård? There's no special effects enhancement in your mind?
No, yeah, they, similarly to Lily Rose Depp, with all of, like, the extreme, like, contortion and body work she does, like, they've done a lot of interviews, like, none of that is CGI. It is all her just doing all of that practically. And yeah, same thing with Bill Skarsgård as Orlok. That is actually his voice.
Yeah. Also, his manner as Count Orlok. Sometimes in the past, especially with Dracula, Dracula is somewhat charming, at least initially, welcoming, friendly to a little bit of a degree. None of that here with Count Orlok. I mean, very early on, he says, "You are to address me as my lord." And I mean, he's rude. He is to the point. I mean, if it was me in that role, I would have run out of the room.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just really menacing and intimidating, but also was done in a believable way. And that's a real trick. In terms of the appearance, you're absolutely right. There's no way that you would have known that that was Bill Skarsgård unless people told you going in. We did know that. But if that information wasn't available, if that had been hidden by the studio, you could have guessed 1,500 different actors and you would not know who was doing that voice. Or who was creating that appearance, rather. The way the makeup was, it did not look like him at all. So it really did disguise him. One other thing in terms of the appearance, I want to get your thought on this. It's very effective. And again, it doesn't look like Skarsgård at all, but it's also very different from the Count Orlok of the 1922 silent film and then that remake that you love, 1979, with Klaus Kinski. Were you surprised that Eggers went in a different direction as far as the look?
I wasn't super surprised, again, because I obsessively read everything, like every article and interview, for like the year leading up to the release of this movie. So I knew going in kind of what, Eggers was going for from the beginning, that he really wanted to go back to, really the vampire of folklore at the time that this film is set. It's not it's not the Bela Lugosi like suave looking nobleman. It's not the Max Schreck or Klaus Kinski very unearthly kind of thing, but still recognize still kind of recognizably human in ways. But with this Orlok, the fact that he is literally a decomposing body that is walking around due to sorcery, I really loved. And I feel like it is probably the best representation of like the old folkloric vampire that has ever been put on film. And I applaud that.
He's not handsome, but he's not grotesque in appearance either. Maybe with the voice, he becomes grotesque, but just in terms of physical appearance, it's almost somewhere between, the romantic Lugosi and the horrid Kinski, don't you think?
I do, yeah, and I really, really enjoy too that the movie does such a great job of like not letting you see him for a very long time. Like the first time you see him when Hutter first arrives, like he's just a silhouette in the distance. And then when they're in the castle, in their first scene together, you don't, the camera doesn't let you get lingering looks at him. Like you'll see his hands, his rings, the nails, the back of him, but it's a long time before you get a clear view of his face, and an even longer time before you see fully what he looks like. So I really loved the restraint of that, because I always, as I always say, like your imagination is so much more powerful than anything that you could visually be shown. So it lets you build up like wonder in your mind, like, oh God, what does his face look like? You hear him, but you don't see him. So the reveals of him, I thought were very well timed.
Josh, one last question on Skarsgård. You mentioned that you're already a big fan of him going in, but do you think this film role and what he did with it, is this going to make him a superstar?
I mean, he deserves it for sure. I don't know if he'll necessarily make him a superstar, in like a mainstream Hollywood way necessarily, because I think just for the chief fact that he is completely unrecognizable in it, which is a very good thing in this instance. But I hope it continues to show, people and producers and other directors just what a shape-shifting performer he is in all ways.
Well, we spent quite a bit of time on Orlok as played by Skarsgård, but there's some other great performances. We're going to touch on as many of them as we can. And let's move on to really the central character on the good side of things, and that is the character of Ellen Hutter, played by Lily Rose Depp. And I had to admit, going in, I didn't know a lot about her other than the fact that she was the daughter of Johnny Depp, and I had to wonder a little bit about nepotism. I don't think I've seen really too many, if any, of her films in the past. I was pleasantly surprised by her performance. I thought she was quite good. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, I think she proved all the haters wrong, to speak frankly about it. I hadn't seen any of her previous work either. And I like you was I think a little disappointed when the casting was initially announced, because it was originally, way back when the film was supposed to happen the first time. Ellen was supposed to be played by Anya Taylor-Joy, who of course played Thomasin in The Witch. Amazing actor. So when they, she wasn't able to do it because of scheduling conflicts. So when they cast, Lily Rose Depp, I was like, oh, okay, we'll see. But I thought she was incredible. I think, her performance in this film, has more than proved that she is an incredible actor with insane dedication and chops. And I look forward to seeing, what she does next. Like she does, she puts it all out there in this movie. She does not hold back. Very, very courageous, and wonderfully disturbing performance. I loved her work.
Yeah. She looks very pale in appearance, and at times very fragile character who seems to be on the verge of a nervous breakdown, but then at other times really a pillar of strength.
Yeah, and that was one thing I kind of wished in the film, because there is one scene in particular I'm thinking of where she really stands up to someone, to a male authority figure, and that is not Orlok. Although there is that too, but stands up to a male authority figure and really, as a woman, 17th century woman, like really just giving it to him. And I loved those moments for her, and I kind of wish that there was a little more of that, in the film. Like she was in a very, aside from the amazing possession scenes that she is in a very vulnerable place throughout much of the movie, and is there's a lot of weeping going on, which again is very much like, sort of the melodramatic trope of the time period, so it fits. But I love Mina Harker, and even though Ellen is not exactly Mina Harker, it's based on her, so I wish there were more moments in the film where she got a chance to show more of her strength. Like they're definitely there, but I would have loved even more of that from her. But that, that's the script, not against her.
I thought she did really well. I thought she was amazing in this role too. But let's move on to Nicholas Hoult for a moment. He did an excellent job in, the comedy Renfield that was released a year or two ago. So how do you feel he portrayed the character as Thomas Hutter? What do you feel his performance was like?
Yeah, I think again he was wonderful. I thought the performances of every single actor, in the main cast of the movie were all like A plus. Like there's not a weak link in this cast. Like the acting is amazing across the board. And I thought Nicholas Hoult did a really terrific job of making the Thomas Hutter / Jonathan Harker character, again, as we talked about, someone that you root for. Like he seems like a really nice, inviting guy. Like is very charismatic. Obviously, like head over heels in love with his wife. Wants to make more money at his job to support them. But the things that I love most about his performance are just like his moments of extreme terror, especially in the first section of the film in the castle. Because again, the film doesn't show you a lot of Orlok in the beginning. So what we're seeing is like these huge close-ups on his just absolutely terrified to the bones face, so that his reaction to Orlok is informing how we see Orlok in our minds. And I just thought he did an amazing job at conveying that fear and just that sort of awe at being confronted with the otherworldly.
Oh, yeah. You definitely nailed it there for sure. He was so believable. I felt his fear with every single scene that he did. And, I think every time I see him as an actor, I think his roles and his performance just keeps improving over and over. Like, I think he's growing so much as an actor.
Yeah, and it's so fun. It's so fun that he, started off in the Renfield role and now he's in the Harker role. Kind of same thing for Willem Dafoe. Playing Max Schreck, playing Orlok in Shadow of the Vampire all those years ago, and now he's the Van Helsing character. Like, there's some fun little echoes in the casting.
Absolutely.
I want to move on to Dafoe in a moment, but one more follow up on Holt. I kind of felt bad for him during that initial meeting. I mean, he was so good portraying the absolute terror, and he's regretting 100%. Why did I take this assignment? This is bonkers. This man is out of his mind. He is pure evil. He could crush me in a moment's notice without thinking twice about it. I felt bad for him. That's how good he was.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I wish I could save you. But like, yeah.
Yeah, a very promising young actor, and I look forward to seeing a lot more stuff from him as well. He's obviously going to be overshadowed by Skarsgård, but you're right. He did a great job, as did Lily Rose Depp, too. Let's talk more about Willem Dafoe, who's been one of my favorites for many years. So he plays the equivalent of Van Helsing, Von Franz, and he's really the only character that brings any kind of humor. This is a very serious film. But with Von Franz, Dafoe plays it with a mix of seriousness, but also with a touch of derangement. There are a couple of moments where you think, yeah, this guy's a bit out of his mind. Did that work for you?
Yes, very much so. I mean, I think Willem Dafoe can do no wrong, basically. But I really admired his performance in this movie for its restraint, because I completely agree with you, Bruce. Like, this is a very, very, very serious film. There's not a lot of levity in it, and what levity there is does come from Dafoe's character and his performance. But I really admired, the restraint he had with that, because it is so easy to play a Van Helsing-esque character and go just way over the top with it, with like, the accent and like the potential kookiness of him. I mean, you compare like what Defoe does here to what Anthony Hopkins did in the Coppola Bram Stoker's Dracula, where Anthony Hopkins is like chewing all the scenery, and it's delightful to watch. Love it to death. But Defoe, even though he had the comedy and the levity lies with him, it doesn't break the tone of the movie. Like, he walks a very, very, very good tightrope with it. I think with his performance, that allows you some moments to chuckle and laugh, but like doesn't take you out of the atmosphere that Eggers creates for the rest of the film. But yeah, I thought he was terrific in it. Really, really great.
Another interesting performer is a lesser known actor. I'm not as familiar with him, Ralph Ineson. He plays Dr. Severs, and I thought he was really good. I mean, I had no expectation for him at all. What'd you feel about the job he did?
Yeah, again, I thought he was wonderful. If I remember correctly, I think he played the father in The Witch. I think that's where I'd seen him before. Of course, that was almost close to 10 years ago now that came out, which is crazy. So he's a little older now. But I thought he did he just has a terrific look about him and a great voice that just fits period work really well. And I thought
Yeah.
he, perfectly served the function that the character needed to. That sort of, the medical man voice of reason, who is kind of just at a loss as to what he is confronted with here, and say, but also being a man of science, but also having things, but here we might want to consider these other things. Here's this other guy I know. He's a bit wacky, but he might be able to help us. So I thought it was a really great performance. Very good Dr. Seward avatar in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Innocent, he looks like he came straight from the 1830s, and he sounds like he came from the 19th century. He's just a perfect fit.
Yeah.
So some great performances across the board, and there were other key performances too. The friends of Ellen and Thomas, they did well, even though we're not going to delve into their efforts quite as much. So very strong actors, actresses, really from start to finish. I want to talk a little bit about some of the scenes and some of the differences maybe between this film and the earlier two Nosferatu movies. I thought the two scenes that were the most powerful, we already talked about when Hutter first encounters Count Orlok, and that was tremendously good. But in addition to that, just before that occurs, there's the scene where Thomas is walking through the forest, and he comes to the crossroads, and it's just beautifully filmed, and then he sees the empty carriage. And then the doors open, this empty carriage, the doors open, sort of beckoning him to get in. I thought it was very powerful imagery. What'd you think of that?
Yeah, I thought that was, at the same, as you mentioned, like at the same time, one of the most beautiful, like visually beautiful moments of the film, but also one of the most frightening moments of the film too. Again, like, as you mentioned, the way it's framed, like having him at the crossroads, this black crossroads in the middle of the night with this white snow falling, and then you just see this empty riderless coach with these black horses come hurtling toward him, and it's almost a jump scare, and then the doors open, and then he has no choice but to get in. I really thought that was tremendously effective. And because there's all, in many versions you can tell that, like, oh, Orlok / Dracula is the one driving the coach, but I thought in this version, to the best of my recollection, that you don't really see a driver ever. It just is sort of going along, and I thought that was terrific. Again, really help tell the story that this Orlok is an undead sorcerer, that you see a lot more of him doing magic, things like making things happen like that. But yeah, that was such a good scene.
Yeah. How about the first view of the castle?
Yeah, I thought that was wonderful, and I love that they, for the exteriors of that castle, they actually used a castle in Transylvania. I think, I think it's called Castle Corvin or something like that. It's something close to that. But it is one of the largest still existing castles in that region that, like, isn't a complete ruin. They're actually doing a great job restoring it, which is why they didn't film on the inside, because it looked too nice.
Yeah.
Like the decrepit ruin they wanted. But that castle also is connected to Vlad Tepes, as well, because he was briefly imprisoned there during his lifetime. So
really?
Yeah, so there's some fun little, again, some echoes there. Like, that must have been quite a feeling to be on set for those days and know that, like, we're at a place where the original historical Dracula was.
Yeah. Very interesting. Did not know that. Some aspects to this film that were a little different as compared to some of the earlier versions, at least with my recollection, you would know better than me, but the incorporation of the gypsy camp. I don't really remember gypsies being prominent in the first two films. And we see this very large gypsy camp set up in front of the local inn where Hutter is going to stay that first night. What'd you think of that incorporation of the gypsies?
Yeah, I think that was a great nod, again by Eggers to really, honor the historical accuracy of it, because with the Romani people, like that's where all the folklore stems from originally. So I think including them in this film, especially in the way he did, was a really effective way to introduce the audience to the vampire lore. The fact that, when Hutter first arrives and like he thinks they're dancing and singing, doing all this stuff like for his joyous arrival, and then they all just start laughing at him because they know where he's going and that he is not, nothing good is going to happen to him, and they're like, you have no idea what you're getting into. But
Yeah.
also, showing the great scene, later on at night when he sees that the ritual they're doing, to try and find the grave of, a vampire that's been tormenting the village. Again, like great way of introducing more of the authentic folklore into Nosferatu that, wasn't there previously in other versions.
Josh, do you think that was a dream or that actually happened?
I think it actually happened. I think it's definitely set up to be ambiguous. Like, he, the lead, like the sort of lead, what we take to maybe be the leader of the group, looks at him, and then the next thing is like he wakes up in bed as if it's from a nightmare, but then he looks down and his boots are covered in mud and leaves. So he at the very least was out in the woods. But I think it's one of those things that, was it partially a dream? Was it all a dream? Did it all happen? It's just another thing to knock Hutter off balance, and let him know that he's in a very different world now than the one he left back at home.
Right. When he wakes up the next morning, he goes outside the inn. The camp has disappeared entirely. What did you take from that? What was the significance of that?
Again, I think you could definitely probably take it different ways. Like, you could they like were they ever there at all? Was that all in his imagination? I think for me, the way I took that moment is that, he like that they're there because they know there's this vampire and they're trying to find the vampire, which they do. And so after they do that, then they decide to get out of here. And take Thomas's horse with them,
Right.
which is what he gets for snooping, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think, just like storytelling wise, I think it's very effective because then like he has to make the rest of the journey completely alone, which I think, does a great job of setting up, the scene that we talked about with the carriage and when he first gets to the castle, that, there's lots of people around and then there's nobody but him.
Yeah. The other difference I wanted to get your thought on was this biting of the chest that we see over and over, as opposed to the traditional biting of the neck. What did you think about that alteration?
Love that. Again, like going back to the original, folklore. That biting of the chest is what was most common. Less commonly on the neck. So I really liked that. In Carmilla, the original novella Carmilla, by Sheridan Le Fanu, Carmilla bites Laura on the chest as well. And I like the biting on the chest, for as a historian, but I also love it because it is so much more intimate and primal to do that. And I without giving too much away, to folks who have not seen the film yet, I really loved just how Orlok is visually shown feeding on people. It is very, very sensual and like carnal. I guess carnal is a better way to. It's very carnal. It's not, as it sometimes is in vampire movies, like, I'm biting your neck. No, it is deeply unpleasant to watch, and disturbing. Like, and again, great sound design, with Orlok in this movie, that you literally hear like the sucking of, like, suctioning of blood from a body. I liked that a lot. And I'll just stop there.
Yeah. I've never been bitten on the chest, but I would imagine it's more painful than being bitten on the neck.
Probably so.
I'll have to conduct an experiment on that to get a clearer answer. I want to also ask you, Josh, about the cinematography and the very dark imagery. And at times, it's so dark, it almost made you feel like you were watching a black and white film. I almost forgot that it was in color. Did you have that same sensation?
Yeah, I love those moments where it does almost go to black and white, which I think is really cool. And I really love that for most of the film, they used either natural light, like natural sunlight, or candlelight, or light from, the fire in the fireplace, that there are very few actual stage lighting. It reminded me a lot of Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon in that way, and that there's something about when you do a period film, and you use like natural light, it just immerses you in the world even more, I think, because what you're seeing is how people back then would have seen things. Like that one scene I loved was where the Anna character, played by Emma Corrin, who's kind of a Lucy-ish analog, sort of, but not really. But where she puts her kids to bed and closes the door, and all she's got is a candle, and the rest of the house is totally dark. So it's just her with one candle surrounded by this pitch black darkness, and you're like, oh God, I know something's going to be in the dark, like that's going to come for her. And yeah, it's tremendously effective. I loved all those choices.
So, Josh, how do you think that this particular version of Nosferatu is going to influence future horror films or adaptations of other classic stories?
Oh, what a great question. One of the reasons why I'm excited that, as we talked about at the beginning of our conversation, that this is, probably for Robert Eggers, like going to be the biggest find. It already has made more money than, his other films have, in terms of its like opening weekend. So that's great, and I hope that, as this, fingers crossed, like, gets more into the mainstream, more people see it. I hope that, I guess two things I would hope for. One, I hope that it encourages people, who are adapting classic works, or like works that are in a, that are in the past, in, the centuries past, that really go nuts on the historical research, and like putting, not just like as preparation, but putting all that research on screen too, I think is so valuable, when you really honor that, really try and recreate visually what was, culturally what was. I think it gives you such a rich experience. So that's one thing. I would also hope, I guess, especially in terms of horror, in film, is that I hope that the way that this movie approaches Orlok and vampires in general, that they're, that, like, as Bruce, as you mentioned, like, there's nothing like suave or kind about him. He is harsh and abrasive and threatening and scare and unpleasant. And I love that, because I feel like we're culturally so used, like, to the Dracula figures being suave aristocrat, very, very like sexy, almost like sexy vampires are so overdone by this point. So let's go in the other direction. Let's have them be the monsters they are, like, and see what art comes out of that.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I love your answer. Thank you so much for that. So I have one additional question, and this can be for you and Bruce as well. But do you see this film having lasting cultural or cinematic significances? Or do you think this is just going to become one of those niche favorites amongst horror fans?
Well, for me, I do think it is going to be remembered. I think it's definitely going to be, moving forward, definitely a part of our larger conversation when we talk about Nosferatu and Dracula, both the Nosferatu, but also Stoker's work as well, and vampires in general. Like I think it's really going to have a place among the rest for that, because it's not just a rehash of what has come before. It really tries to do, a lot of new things with it. Again, like I don't think everything that Robert Eggers is attempting with this is completely successful, but
Mhm.
enough of it is, and it's all so interesting that, I think it's valid, and I think people are going to keep talking about it. And also, the fact that this is an R-rated, very dark and serious horror movie that released on Christmas Day and made a ton of money, like, I hope is, inspiring to future horror producers to give things like this a shot.
Yeah, Tracy, to answer your question, I hope that this film gets nominated for a bunch of Academy Awards, not only in terms of special effects and cinematography, but also as Best Picture.
Mhm.
Not that I've necessarily seen a lot of other non-horror films, but man, if a horror film as good as this can't get nominated for Best Picture, nothing can. I mean, to me, this deserves that kind of. I'm not saying it should win, but at least get nominated. I really believe that.
Right. No, I agree. And I think it'll be interesting to see when the categories are announced if this one will be accepted. I think you're right. It does deserve a huge nod.
All right, Josh, let's get your final assessment. If you can kind of wrap this up in a paragraph, if you will, your feelings on the film. Obviously, you like it, but if you can maybe put it in context a bit further, and also give us your ranking. We like to rank films here, 1 to 5 stars. Where would you rank this? What's your assessment of Nosferatu?
Great. So I think I out of 1 to 5 stars, I think I would give this a very, very solid 4 for me, for sure. I think it is, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, like, obviously very much a labor of love, that, like, great attention to detail was paid by everyone who made it in every single department, whether it's, the acting, the writing, the directing, but also all elements of design. The design, especially, my God, there's costumes. We had mentioned the
Mhm.
costumes. My God, the costumes. Um, but so it really stands out for that. And, again, I think pace honors what came before it, but it is also very much its own film. It is the Nosferatu for, the first quarter of this century. We have 1922, 1979, now 2024. Like, I love that it has become, like, almost a myth of cinema on its own, like, even apart from Dracula, that keeps being reinvented, every few generations. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Josh, as always, great insights on this film. You give it 4 stars. I think it certainly deserves that. We really appreciate your time being with us. Before you go, let me ask you what's coming up for you as we head into 2025. Any new projects, anything that's coming up you'd like to make us aware of?
Yes, and it's actually very relevant to the conversation we've had today. So for anyone who is in the Philadelphia area, I host a live monthly horror hosting show at a place in South Philly called the Painted Mug Cafe. My horror host
Mm-hmm.
name is Josh Hitchens. As someone gave to me, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that Josh Hitchens. Yep, that's the one. Yeah, can't compare that. But it's every month, and to start off the new year, and of course with the immense conversation around the Robert Eggers Dracula, January 18th, 2025, I'm going to be showing the original Nosferatu live and in person at the Painted Mug Cafe. So looking forward to that. Also going to be showing before the short film House of the Devil from 1896, which is regarded by many as the first horror film. So it's all going to be about celebrating the birth of horror at Movie Macabre on January 18th. So that is the next immediate thing for me.
And you're going to continue to do monthly appearances at the Painted Mug. Is that on Friday nights you do those?
Saturday nights, yes.
Saturday nights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's every month. Probably October. So I started last March. Probably going to go January through October this year, because November and December, everyone's got lots of stuff going on with various holidays. So starting in January, then every month through Halloween. Yes.
Very good. And for anybody that's in the Philadelphia area or close to it, what's the best way for them to get an updated schedule? Is it your Facebook page or a website?
Yeah, so you can either friend me, Josh Hitchens on Facebook. There is also a page for my horror host alter ego on Facebook, and if you search for Josh Hitchens Philly horror movie host, you will find that. But I always do announcement on both pages, and also keep on checking the paintedmugcafe.com and look at their upcoming events. They do lots of really, really cool events at their venue besides my show.
Very nice. Very nice. Josh Hitchens has been our guest. He is a very accomplished writer, historian, director, actor, playwright, and just generally a horror renaissance man, as we like to call him. Author of several books. He's done a number of one-man plays and a frequent contributor to our program here at the Ghostly Gallery. Josh, as always, thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you both so much. Always love being on my favorite podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. We're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, Tracy and I will have brief thoughts, our own personal opinions on Nosferatu 2024. Stay with us on the Ghostly Gallery podcast. Welcome back to the Ghostly Gallery podcast. Again, our thanks to author and historian Josh Hitchens giving us his thoughts on the new film Nosferatu. And now Tracy and I will have a little bit of time to talk about the film. I mean, we've sort of given you a hint about what we like about it and what we think of it, but we'll go into just a little bit more depth. So Tracy, when I look at this film, one of the things that really strikes me, it's not a typical vampire film. It's not about biting people and trying to make them into vampires and trying to increase the vampire population or anything like that. It's really all about possession and plague. Number one, possessing the soul of Ellen Hutter. Mm-hmm. And number two, spreading the plague throughout Wittenberg, Germany, all in the quest to bring death to the human race. So this is a film that, as much as I love it, it's a little bit different from your typical Dracula vampire genre. So that's one of the things that really kind of struck me. Let me get some of your thoughts on Nosferatu. What'd you think of it?
I thought it was great. I'm happy. Like, I'm so super happy, actually, that I finally got to see this film. I feel like I've been waiting for like 10 years for this project to be released. So I was happy to finally get to see it. I thought it was really fascinating what they did with Count Orlok. I didn't even recognize Bill Skarsgård. Not at all. Like, if I didn't know that he was portraying that character, I never would have guessed. It didn't look like him. It didn't sound like him. He was just so good, and he was so menacing. Like, it was just creepy and menacing. I really liked Lily Rose Depp. She was great. She was believable, and she was just never over the top, because just in some of those scenes, maybe different actresses might have gone a little over the top. I think she did really great. This is actually the first time I've ever seen her in a project, and it was really impressive. And she's so young, like she's really young, and I think she's got a really good future in, this industry. Overall, I thought this film, it had a really eerie vibe to it in a really unsettling way. Like you could feel it in the pit of your stomach, I guess.
Mm.
Just the setting, the way it was filmed. And like, I don't know if you noticed, but all of the sounds that were throughout the movie, like the kind of the way that Bill Skarsgård talked, and just like other like growling type sounds throughout the film, it just added to the creepy factor. And
Yeah.
again, I agree with you too. Like it was different. Um, Not what I was really expecting in a way. It was just evil, and it had like a supernatural type tinge to it. So
Yeah.
yeah, thought it was
The
interesting.
movie, yeah, the movie's about 2 hours and 10 minutes, but I didn't
Mm.
feel that it was that long. Sometimes even a good movie, when it's that long, it's dragging, you're like, yeah, get to the conclusion. I didn't really feel that with this movie. Did
No,
you? No.
no, it was a little bit, I think it was a little bit slow burn at the beginning, but they needed to do that to tell the story and to describe the characters and to make those characters relatable. So they really needed that time. And, I know typically like a good horror film should be about 90 minutes or just a little bit more. And yes, this one was longer, but it really needed to have that for the development, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. My final assessment of Nosferatu, I absolutely loved it. Beautifully filmed, a compelling story, well acted. Really, I saw only one flaw in my mind. That was the ending, which it wasn't bad. It was okay. I thought it could have been a little bit more dramatic, maybe more of a jump scare or some surprise. Um, that's just a slight criticism, though. Again, not a bad ending, just maybe not as dramatic as I would have liked. And that's the only thing that really prevents me from giving this 5 stars. I'm going to give it 4.5. And I rarely give a horror film that many stars, 4.5. But I think Nosferatu really deserves it. And it is the best horror film I've seen in 2024. And we've talked about some others, some really good ones like Late Night with the Devil and Long
Mhm.
Legs. Those were outstanding. This one, I though felt was just a little bit better. Best film of 2024, and really the best horror movie I've seen in a long time. How about you, Tracy? What is your ranking for this film? Help me out here.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I have to say I have to agree. The ending was a little bit off. I just can't believe that that's how they kind of like took him out. Um,
Hmm.
I really thought they would have done something a little more daring for sure. But overall, I enjoyed this film. It was a great story. The cast was remarkable. And I felt like I was there. I don't know if it was like the whole
Hmm.
experience altogether, but it just felt so realistic. It was phenomenal. Um, I think it, for the most part, it lived up to the hype. Um, but my expectations were sky high, so like it wasn't like fully there. I
Hmm.
give it 4 stars for sure. Um, Not that there was anything wrong with it or it wasn't well done. I felt maybe it was missing just a tiny little something. I don't know what that
Hmm.
is, but it might have just been the ending that kind of like tweaked it. But I would say go see it if you haven't seen it. It's
Absolutely.
excellent, and I love what Josh said throughout, the conversation about like it being a period piece and how it was like just very historical. And I just thought it was great. So it's definitely 4 stars. Go see it. It's really worth it. Go to the theater, actually. Go to the theater.
Yeah. Was this
Yeah.
your first time at the theater since the pandemic?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which was weird, very weird, but interesting.
Yeah. And you were telling me that up in your neck of the woods in Nova Scotia, the film actually did not open on Christmas Day. It was a couple of days later, right?
That's right. It didn't open
Yeah.
Christmas Day, and I wasn't going to go on Christmas Day anyway, just because very busy with the family. But
Sure.
my intention was to go on Boxing Day, which was the day after Christmas, and it wasn't showing, which was so strange for such a popular
Yeah.
movie. So yeah, it was odd. I feel like they really kind of missed out on that piece, but that's just our local theater. Could have
Yeah.
just been a weird exception, but yeah, good
So
experience.
across the board, great reviews from everybody. Tracy goes 4 stars. Josh Hitchens 4 stars. I went just a little higher at 4.5, but man, 4 stars or better. That's pretty much a classic, an instant classic, Nosferatu. Tracy, appreciate it as always. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thanks, Bruce. This was great. I loved it.
We thank Tracy, we thank Josh Hitchens, and of course, we thank all of our listeners and viewers for being with us in this Museum of the Macabre. And we do hope you'll join us next time right here in the Ghostly Gallery.